Good evening and welcome to Mindful Life 302. I am your host Nathan Springer. Well, actually, I am your co-host Nathan Springer. This is your host right here, Leora Springer, and I'm your co-host Nathan. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us. It is the first of November, brand new month, second to last month of the year in the year 2023. The year is speeding going along, and thank you for being here. As usual, this has been brought to you by Mindful Education, Mindful with 2Ls_education if you're looking for us on Instagram. That's the educational institution that I run, and we offer learning pods which are small, in-person, more intimate, if you will, learning style classes with a homeschool geared learning approach, so you get more comfort and more familiarity in how you teach in that sense. So if you're interested in that, you can hit us up, Mindful Education. And also we offer personal private tutoring for most CXC and CAPE subjects if you're interested in those. You might be repeating, you might be first time you're doing it, you want some specialized attention in a particular field, you're not sure about it. Well, you can get in touch with us and we'll send a tutor out to you. But that's not what we're talking about today. Today, the first story I'm talking about is one of those that you hear every now and again, that you wonder, what is the just way for a story like this to actually turn up? What is the fair way for these things to end? How is it supposed to end? Let me pull in my mic a little closer there for YouTube folks. Yeah, what is the fair way for something like this to end? That's the interesting thing with a story like this. What is supposed to be the outcome for something like this? And let's get into the story and you'll understand exactly what I'm saying here. Man freed after 13 years. Let me read that again. Man freed of rape after 13 years. Yeah, it's one of those stories. 13 years after he was charged with raping a minor, a penal man was freed on Monday after a medical examiner testified that the girl's hymen was present. On hearing the verdict in the O'Meara Judicial Center before Justice Tricia Hudlin Cooper that he was free to go, Ronnie Burrows covered his face with his hands and kept his head bent for several minutes. As he left the courtroom, he thanked God for the victory. Burrows, now 36, was charged in 2011 with raping a 12-year-old girl on All Year's Day 2010. Now, I wonder, first up, if he was in jail for the 13 years. That's the first thing I'm wondering. Was he in jail for that entire period of time where he was accused of this, waiting to find out if indeed he was guilty? Oh, Trini Hotep. 13 years. I'll read the headline. I see Trini Hotep now coming there, and I saw Rani just came in too. Man freed of rape after 13 years. And that's 2010. 2010 the allegation was made about, and 2011 he was charged and he was just freed. I am wondering, first up, my first question, was he in jail all that time? Because if you were in jail all that time, sir, I don't understand how you won't be better with society. And then you understand why sometimes you read on an article, you see a bit of news, you see something coming out of the courts where you see someone charged with rape and they're given bail. Because I would wish that this man was given bail. If you spent 13 years to find out that indeed you were innocent, I would hope that at least you were given bail at the start there. So those 13 years, you would have been on trial. It's not like the 13 years would have been a perfect walk in the park. You'd have still been on trial for about one of the worst crimes a man can be accused of. But if you were out of jail, at least you'd have your freedom. He'll be a few millions richer, Ronnie says. That's real BS. Well, I don't even know if he'll be a few millions richer. If he was in jail, what would he sue them for? What law would they have broken? What law would they have broken by putting him in jail? He indeed was charged for a crime, and you are held until you are found guilty or innocent for some crimes. It just so happens the holding was 13 years. I hope he got bail, personally. And that's why sometimes, you know, when you see a case, regularly it happens. And the automatic reaction, it happens to me sometimes. You see a case and something extremely reprehensible that someone is accused of. I saw recently another politician was arguing, I believe it was Keith Scotland, was arguing that I don't know if he was given bail, Ronnie. I'm supposing they didn't give that bit of information, but Keith Scotland was arguing that they should return to Parliament to ensure that murder accused people cannot access bail, and I disagree. For this very same reason. Sometimes someone can be accused of something, charged of something, and that does not necessarily mean they are guilty. The allegation is that he took a young lady to some dirt track and etc, etc, etc. But the counter to this is that the DMO showed that the young lady's hymen was intact, which means that, I mean, there could have technically been some kind of something, but it's highly unlikely that it would have been to the full extent of the allegations made. In his defense, Burroughs said the case against him was fabricated due to several disputes between his and the girl's family, one of which led to a court matter. He denied ever taking her to Laboratories and having sex with her. He testified that he did not meet the girl at a school get-together, but at a Tiger Rock bar, Pinal, in November 2010. So the allegation from the man is he met this 12-year-old girl in a bar, and they tried to set him up because there was some friction between him and the girl's family. Listen, if what the man is saying is true, then that girl needs to face prison time, in my opinion. That girl would need to see prison time, in my opinion. Because if it indeed is a total fabrication, like, you know, sometimes the reason regularly you hear that people, good evening Kuvon, regularly you hear people say that false allegations of assault and rape of such a nature, they should carry a penalty of the same punishment that the person who was falsely accused would have had to face if they were found guilty. And I could understand that, I could agree with that sometimes even, but there's a plausible caveat to that, because sometimes someone could be found not guilty of a crime, and it's not that the person who accused them made it up, or that it was made in with a malicious intent. Sometimes it's just the nature of a misunderstanding. That could be possible. And like some kind of background noise there, and it might be possible that there could be a misunderstanding, and okay, the court case resolves all of this, but a misunderstanding, misinterpretation business is something way different from a total fabrication. I believe a total fabrication, well, you see, the thing is, Nisi, the test would have very likely have been done right after the incident happened. But the case cannot be thrown out until it is heard in court. And he had to wait 13 years for the case to be heard in court. This year, so when was that test done that those results now available? Huh? That's the problem with the delay in the system. You know, and it's like you get all the worst of both worlds, or the worst of all the worlds in this. Because innocent people are punished when they're caught up in the system like this. A man who was found innocent, now he had 13 years. If he, the story didn't say whether he was granted bail. If he was granted bail, he would have had 13 years with accusations of an underage statutory rape on his name. And if he was not granted bail, he would have had jail for 13 years. An innocent man, at least a man found innocent. And then on the flip side, the guilty people are tied up in the system, and 13 years to find me guilty, so I could have 13 years of rampaging through the society before I am ever found guilty. And if I was granted bail for whatever my crime might be, then on the 13th year, when you're attempting to find me to get my court case heard, well, I just don't show up. And what are you going to do? Charge me with another crime? And then what? Wait another 13 years to find me guilty of that other crime? For the guilty people, it's not a problem. They don't care. That's what our system is doing. And therein is the importance of innocent until proven guilty. That's like your cousin's mother who said in neighbor rape her infant son. Wow. Those allegations that are thrown around just like that, they aren't light allegations. And you know, it's always a difficult minefield to maneuver because it is something that does happen. Like the boy who cried wolf. The reason the boy who cried wolf was such a scary thing is because occasionally the wolves do come and eat up the sheep. There are instances where men around young women do take advantage and commit crimes, heinous crimes. You know, they like to rampage these people in jail for those kinds of crimes. Exactly. Imagine you're innocent and have to go through 13 years of that. I don't even want to imagine that. The imagination of that might be too much for me, and that's just imagination. Wow. That's like your cousin's mother who accused a neighbor of rape of her infant son. To this day, this man can't walk around without eyes, but she never made a police report, and she is a police. Well, you see, things like that, that's the reason that you're supposed to be able to sue people for things like that. It's insane. It is insane. Like, for me, I think an investigation like this into this man, the investigation should go both ways. Because it should be understood by now that just as the reality of rape is a horrible act and a horrible reality, it should be understood by now that the reality of false accusations are likewise. So, just as you're investigating whether it did happen to me, the investigation should be going both ways. And the punishment should happen if there is proof of this. This government is not ready. Rowley has failed the people. Well, I may agree in general with that. I may agree in general. You know, the more I read about this whole fire ladder business, as you're talking about the government failing the people, the more I read about this ladder business in the fire service, it to me, it's a symptomatic story of Trinidad and Tobago. The story explains so much of what happens in this country. If you want to understand a lot of why Trinidad runs the way Trinidad runs, you read this ladder story. You follow along with this ladder story. Don't blame me. Fire chief on $1 million ladder fiasco. Chief Fire Officer Arnold Bristow is distancing himself from the fiasco that saw $1 million being spent to buy 20 unusable ladders. Instead, he is blaming the previous person in charge for the ladders which had to be discarded. Bristow previously said that details with respect to the purchase would be disclosed. However, a statement issued by the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service Communications Department yesterday did not provide any information except to lay blame on the former Fire Service Administration and give assurances that proper procurement standards will take place in the future. And regularly you see this. Regularly you see things like this. It's easy to throw a wrong blame, but nothing reaches to the level of accountability. You don't see any hard numbers, any clear evidence, because that means someone would have to be held accountable. It's easy to say, well, it was them fault, because them is who? Them is a vague entity. A vague nebulous entity. Them, whoever them is, them doesn't get thrown in jail. You can't find them guilty. Them cannot be brought to court. You got to have a name and a direct crime, and the allegation has to be clear. Hardly ever find that happening. National Security Minister Fitzgerald Hines on Sunday also distanced himself from the ladder fiasco, saying there should be a thorough investigation into the purchase. Kervon is asking, why were the ladders unusable? Now, Kervon, that's a very good question, and I was wondering about some of that. You know, people were talking about the fact that they were wooden ladders, and you know, it's for fire. But the reality is, you don't put the ladder in a flame for the fire officer to climb onto the building, whether the ladder was wooden or not. And now, I'm not saying the ideal might be a wooden ladder for firefighting. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying I could still see a wooden ladder. It's not that you're putting it in the fire because a fire officer has to climb it. It's just on the side of a building. Yes, I'm getting to that, Dalip Jairam. The reason they said that the ladders could not work is they couldn't fit onto the gantry of the building, of the fire vessel. But here's something interesting from this article. Speaking to the Express by phone yesterday, Ram Kisoon said the truck in the video, because let me go a little higher. President of the Fire Services Association, Leo Ram Kisoon, called for a probe into the matter. He maintained that the ladders were unsuitable and exorbitantly priced. Listen to this though. A 30-second video was circulated on social media yesterday showing fire officers unmounting one of the wooden ladders from a fire truck. Interesting. Speaking to the Express by phone yesterday, Ram Kisoon said the truck in the video with the wooden ladder resulted only after work had been done on the truck to fit the ladder. I mean, so when I read this, my first question was, well, why couldn't work be done on 19 other trucks to fit the 20 ladders? Like, how hard is it, really? Ram Kisoon had said that the ladder was unable to fit at the top of the fire truck's gantry area. He said modifications were done to the top of one fire truck with welding work to extend the gantry to fit the ladder. Ram Kisoon said most of the trucks in the fire service do not have this welded modification. Why couldn't they add the welded modification? Like, if you already, don't get me wrong, My first question in the whole thing would be, why not purchase ladders that fit to the truck specification? That would make the most sense. But okay, there might be a reason why these wooden ladders, they may be more lightweight, better to extend something. I could buy a reason that these ladders could make more sense. You could sell a reason to me. If that be so, then adjust the gantry of the fire truck. The welded modification is another $1 million, bro. I see, Dream Chaser, I see. But you see, either way, even if the welded modification was another $1 million, that would have still made more sense spending $2 million to get the ladders on the trucks than spending $1 million, and now God alone knows where the ladders are. We don't even have the ladders to look at them. The mods might have ended up like the retrieval of the crash truck, the $10 million to retrieve the fire truck. The old people statement, the candle costs more than the funeral, quite literally in that case. Ramki soon said most of the trucks in the fire service do not have this welded modification. Unless they refit the gantry for those ladders and those trucks, those ladders cannot be used, he said. He said to his knowledge there was only one truck that had been adjusted to fit the ladder. So to me, that's just another layer for the investigation. The ladders had to be modified even after they came into the country. Well, I didn't read anything about the ladders being modified. I read about the gantry being modified. And my query is, why not modify it? You already bought the ladders. They're already here. Why not just modify it? But no one does that. And now we'll demand an investigation, and an investigation will be demanded from this one and that one and the other one. And Taro Boy says, I saw this with my own eyes. The ladders had to be modified even after they came into the country. I won't doubt you. Spending more money is not solving the problem. We need better leaders and decision makers. I agree. Sayochan says maybe this has been answered, but why are they using wood ladders to fight fires? No, it has not been answered. It has not been answered, Sayochan. Now, I was saying that someone can sell me this. It's not impossible for me to believe that there may be wooden ladders suitable for that purpose. Maybe the wood makes it more lightweight, and as I was saying, even though fire officers fight fires, you don't put the ladder in the fire to climb into the fire, generally speaking. The ladders are just more for access. So it's not like the ladders are supposed to be put into flames. You could sell me on it, but no one has explained it to me. I haven't seen it explained anywhere specifically why those ladders were preferred. As I read previously, the ladders that came with the truck, I believe, were aluminum. I don't know why they didn't go back with aluminum, because aluminum is also lightweight. Jack Dallips asks, what can we do to hold those in authority accountable for their actions? It's very difficult, because if you read through this case, what's happening now, the chief fire officer right now is saying it's not his fault because he recently came into this position. He is throwing the blame backwards. But the people who were there are no longer there, and it's a whole group of people who were there. So who is the individual to blame now? They're saying, you know what, let's not even bother with it. Going forward, the mistake wouldn't be made again. And that's the plausible deniability of politics, of leadership in so many of those places. And that's why it's so hard to get accountability. Who is to blame when it's everybody involved? Who is to blame when everybody is involved? There has been some movement, though, in beside our fire service, inside of our protective service, beside our fire service, there has been some movement now to, attempt to help the police, an attempt to give the police some extra backup. And some people are in support for army call out chambers welcome initiative. Various business chambers have welcomed the call out of members of the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force volunteers to support the crime fight. However, they have some concerns. By and large, most of the chamber were basically happy that now the police are being given some extra backup. The president called out volunteer regiment officers to come out and give the police some backup with the heightened crime spike that we recently had there. And many people seem to be very happy about that. They seem to be very happy about the fact that it seems the police now would be getting a little extra backup. However, while supporting the call out for volunteers, concerns were raised about appropriate training, since policing is not part of the army's training, as their training is effectively for war. And I've seen some people complain about this, that you're worried about the army being out there because they are trained to kill, and I find that to be a trained worry. It's not like the army officers are robots that they're somehow tuned up, and once they touch the street they're just going to shoot people. I don't buy that for a moment. The Commissioner of Police also supports this. She says she's welcoming those volunteers, but I'm not even necessarily looking at her statement. Let's look at the former police commissioner. He released a statement on this also. Griffith, all hands on deck needed. Meanwhile, former police commissioner Gary Griffith said the TNT Defense Force can be instrumental in fighting crime. However, he warned that this arm must not be misused, as an all hands on deck approach is needed to save this country and to restore safety. He says this though, and I found this very curious and on point. Sergeant asks, how do the police feel about that? Will they feel like they're being held accountable or watched? I don't know. Because the regiment isn't there to watch the police. Ideally, the regiment is there to give physical backup to the police, give manpower backup to the police, because the regiment does not have legal policing authority. So they're there for manpower basically towards the police. So I don't think that the police necessarily will have a negative view on this. I am not sure, but I don't think so. But listen to what Griffith was saying here. That a force of 5,000 able-bodied individuals only uses less than 1% of its personnel on a daily basis to aid in our crime-fighting efforts. It shows the failure of this National Security Council to utilize every available tool in its arsenal to guarantee safety and security to a population that put them in charge of its affairs. And I agree. To have 5,000 regiment officers, be paying them, feeding them, housing them, and then have a country that has a murder rate like ours, to me it seems obvious that you needed to use these officers at some point in time before. You have these men already here, already trained and paid for. Why not use them all along? And I keep wondering when I see some of these statements coming from the leaders, and they're now getting serious. I keep wondering, like, what were you waiting on to get serious? Like, okay, what's the next step that you could take to get more serious? Does that fall under a type of War Measures Act in in your constitution? I don't think so, because you don't need war measures to necessarily utilize the regiment. You may need war measures to give the regiment greater power. But either way, the country has been in states of emergency before. And the country was in a state of emergency during the entire period of the pandemic. The regiment officers weren't used then. A lot of the criminal situation in Trinidad, a lot of the crime situation in Trinidad, it feels much more like the authorities have more of an interest in managing the criminals than in getting rid of them. It feels like, you know, they don't really want crime or the criminals to go away. They just want to manage them, to utilize them, to get their means, to get their ends, as a means to an end, to get what they want to get done. You know, that's the feeling you get out of it. You can use them as SRP. Yes, you can. Polygraph bill heads back to the House. More on our national security. The government is going back to the House of Representatives with the integrity testing polygraph bill today, because it recognizes, unfortunately, that some personnel in key state institutions act criminally and become criminals, National Security Minister Fitzgerald Hines said yesterday. So I guess these are some of their plans. If we have valuable intelligence, we need to declare a state of emergency, declare martial law, and conduct the necessary exercises. Well, yeah, that's if we have valuable intelligence, and that's if they're interested in actually getting rid of the criminal underworld. To me, it seems from the outside like, as I said, it's much more of a crime management than a crime fighting issue. They want to manage crime more than fight it. But the government is bringing legislation here to attempt to make it compulsory for certain officers, certain people at certain levels inside law enforcement to have to take a lie detector, as well as other polygraph-like tests. Is it fair for me to say that politicians allow situations to get out of control and then play savior? Yeah, I'd say that's fair. I would say that's fair. KR is very poor on national security. It does feel so. And you know, sometimes I wonder, I think you'll see a lot of resignations if that legislation passes. Well, that might be a positive thing, really and truly. Now, many people always point out that the polygraph is notoriously unreliable, but to me, that's kind of not even the point. That's kind of not even the point, because it provides another weapon in the arsenal of integrity to me. That's what I see it as. But the failure of the present government on crime fighting, sometimes, as I said in my wondering of crime management, I wonder, you know, if there is something to do with the fact that, you know, regularly you see people point out that the PNM is the party that is in power in many of those hotspot areas, those areas that are known to be havens for violent crime. I understand there's white collar crime and other types of crime all over the country, but it's not a lie to notice that the PNM party is predominantly the party in power in many of those hotspot communities. Matthew Cameo says, I'll pay for Alexander's polygraph test. Hi. Hi. I think I saw something about him going on something like 3 years leave or something to that effect, though, so maybe you mightn't have to worry about it. It is an insult that they were saying crime is a public health issue. Yeah, I don't think it is. I do not think crime is public health. Crime is crime. Public health is public health. You don't solve one by treating it like the other. Yeah, I do understand the argument too, but I do think it's wrong because it's not true. It is rumored that he is involved in the criminal underworld. Yes, I've heard that rumor many times. Many times, and I don't think that it's impossible for the rumor to be true. I don't think it's impossible because we know that the reality in Trinidad and Tobago is, even if you don't know for a fact that police officers are involved, just looking at how crime happens in the country, then you could know that police officers are involved. The government actually creates crime hotspots with its housing policy. I agree. They do that, and they engineer slums instead of engineering good communities. And personally, I think to some extent manufacturing communities creates that slummish nature in the first place, where you just take people and ram them into an area. You don't have community building. It's harder to build communities. Yeah, it's harder to build communities like that. But that polygraph bill requires a 3/5 majority to pass. It would require the opposition support, and I don't think it's going to get the opposition support. So if that's the government's plan, I think they need to get plan B going. They are doing a better job with the community building. Union Hall is an example. You see, organic communities, when communities are built organically, there is some familiarity within community members. Community members are from similar walks of life. They have commonalities that allow them to tend to, let me in life. They have similarities that allow them to tend to be more amicable with each other. When you artificially try to craft that, I think you more often run into complications. You stand a much higher chance of running into complications. Just before I let you in the room, let me just finish some other stories that I found interesting there. Coming out of St. Madeleine in the school system or national education system, cops search for parent after attack at St. Madeleine School. The principal of St. Madeleine Secondary School suffered bruises to her face after being attacked by an irate parent during a meeting at the school yesterday. The attack came days after 2 students appeared in court for possession of drugs last Thursday. Police said, listen to this, police said the incident occurred at 9:15 a.m. after the principal called the parent in to discuss the suspension of a male student. That student had 20 suspensions on file. Suspensions on file. And as a teacher myself, you recognize this so many times. And this is one of the problems I have with the public education system. Because they're so obsessed with trying to treat everyone precisely the same, they ignore obvious realities. No child that is a troublemaker at 16 is, well, let me don't say no child, or let me put it this way, it is extremely rare that a child would be a troublemaker at 16 when they were an angel at 10. It doesn't really happen that way. The troublemakers from your primary school, think back to the person who gave the most trouble in your primary school. Chances are they may be someone who is still giving trouble to this day. You see the trends forming. And when you attempt to treat all children the same and carry all of them through the system because you know they will all get a place, you attempt to ignore some of these trends. There's no way a child with 20 previous suspensions, involved in illegal drugs, is still supposed to be there in the school system being dealt with like this. And on the principal's part, I'm not victim blaming here. My heart goes out to the principal. Sue who you have to sue if you can. But if I was a principal and I see a child with 20 suspensions who may be allegedly selling drugs in my school, I don't want a one-on-one meeting with their parent. Especially if I'm a woman. Like, if you see a child with 20 suspensions, allegedly involved in illegal drugs, what kind of person? It is criminal-minded persons. Remove those persons and you can save hotspot communities. I agree, but it's not that easy. How do you remove criminal-minded people from their communities? How do you do that? You have to find the law that they broke. If you cannot, then how do you remove them? And beside the individual criminal-minded person, they create a culture of criminality too. So it's not just the one bad apple. The one bad apple creates a corner inside of the barrel with all the other bad apples, and they attempt to spread their bad apple culture throughout the barrel. They create a culture of criminality. So you go into the hotspot community, you find that criminal-minded person, and they aren't by themselves sleeping behind their closed doors. No, they're out in the road with a crowd around them, attempting to influence the next generation, attempting to influence more people into coming and joining their criminal-minded enterprise. Government is one of the problems, I agree. Good night, Paul Duncan. All you're too wicked, Kilvon says, yep. And, you know, I agree. It's a bad apples issue. I agree. It's a smaller amount of criminally minded people causing a lot of the problems in some of these communities. But we have to understand the nature of how difficult a problem like that is to solve. To stir up a whole nest of woes and troubles here by mentioning this, that's kind of the problem with Gaza right now. If you say Hamas is the terrorist-minded people, and you want to get rid of the terrorist-minded people, and they're surrounded by other people, many of whom may support them, how do you do that? because some of the criminally minded people may have some support from people in the community who may not be perpetrating any crimes. How do you deal with that? 95% of guns and ammunition comes from South. Where did you get that statistic? And how do you know that? 95%? How do you know that? How are you so sure? That sounds like a statistic made up on the fly. Can you show me the source of that statistic? Where do I find that the source of that fact? Because I was always in Venezuela. Okay. Now, a lot of the guns that they're using right now are American-made guns. So even if they're coming from Venezuela, they're coming from the US in the first place. But I would assume many of them, as the police are indeed saying, are coming directly from the United States. They're American-made weapons coming directly from the United States. Nah, I don't buy that the only way guns are coming in are smuggled in from Venezuela. I don't buy that. We need 1 year of Sharia law. No, we do not. I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. By no means do I agree with that. At all. I understand the temptation, and maybe we need a year of extremely strict following of the laws that we currently have, but Sharia, no. I was too part of the game, but I put country first. Okay, political leader Mr. Williams. So you were a former drug and gun runner yourself? Is that what you're saying here on this chat, while putting yourself as a political leader prospect? I mean, you do you, but I don't see how that's gonna work, bro. All right, Rome, what going on, boy? You're waiting a long time. I hope you didn't fall asleep there.
Good night.
Good night.
So, a couple of things, right? I have been listening and I've been reading and we've been having some discussions. And I've been having some discussion with some of my friends. And one of the things for me is this law, this new legislation they bring into Parliament that need a 3/5 majority. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Why bring a legislation to put the Parliament and waste the people and them bloody time if you have not set up and have a discussion whether or not the opposition is going to support the legislation? Because it's a waste of our parliamentary time, it's a waste of resources, it's a waste of paying our parliamentary officers if something else could be attended to. Because you don't need to come up there and need to shame the opposition that they're not supporting this and they're not supporting that, where they know damn well up front you didn't have a consensus across the aisle to find out whether or not they are willing to support the legislation. I hate, this is not no time for the mama guy. This is not no time for the foolishness. Too much of people dying. Too much of people falling by the side with foolishness, and I feel Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley. I've never taught all my 33 years in Trinidad and Tobago. I would have seen a fail Christopher Rowley. Right? When I'm talking about fail, I'm talking as it relates to crime. You can never tell me that on average 4 to 5 people dying a day on average, and you broadcasting that you have in Security Council meeting without any pure KPIs coming out of them that we can use to measure to see that how I as a citizen feel safe in this goddamn place.
You know, what you're saying there was my very same thought about it. The fact that it requires a 3/5 majority, and the last time they brought it, the opposition didn't support it. The last time when they brought it, the opposition wasn't in support. It makes me wonder if at this present time, where we have triple, quadruple murders just bouncing up on each other, if at this present moment they're seeing it fit to play some politics in Parliament, where they're going to bring this bill that they know the opposition isn't going to support and attempt to use it to say, look, we're attempting to fight crime and it's because the opposition is blocking us. And I find that to be
foolish.
If that is the case, let me qualify it. If that is the case, I find that to be particularly foolish. Right before we have a planned bipartisan meeting to discuss crime. So why don't you go to that meeting that the Prime Minister previously signaled that he wasn't going to attend? He was just going to send some representatives. Why don't you personally go meet with the opposition leader, trash out whatever you have to trash out in that meeting, so that you know when you bring this to Parliament you're going to get that support, instead of bringing it to Parliament to show that, look, the opposition not going to support us, and look, we trying. That doesn't make sense. That's not helping the country.
And further to that, Nathan, I do not believe in this army and police patrol. It makes no sense, because let me tell you why. And this is why I tell people we need to be at the stage where they could no longer mamagai us, because that army and police patrol, we're gonna lock up 1,500 people from last until 500 from there, 600 from there, and next after the 6 months, in the whatever time they give us, the legislation, we always call the sunset clause of the legislation elapsed, and now Ram Logan, all of them suing. They say it again because no charges has been come. They only lock up people conveniently, right? So we need to understand. I understand why something needs to be done, but don't fool me. Give me a holistic approach in terms of how we're going from A to Z, because we need to have every institution working in tip-top order, that where we're gonna have a roadmap to get certain things accomplished. Because you could put 1,000 or more army men on the streets, and hear what? Those criminals will wait until they call them back in, and we're going back to ground zero. And this is the thing that I'm talking about, with the level of foolishness and skullduggery, and the level of what these politicians and them think that the people of Trinidad and Tobago deserve. There is no high level function in terms of intellectual thinking from stage 1 to stage 12. It's just pure foolishness.
You know, if we look at a nice example of a country that was being overrun by crime and now they're trying to pull back, El Salvador, the one that we regularly talk about, where the Nayib Bukele, their president, is attempting to revolutionize their country. The country had thousands of murders, now it's down, I think, to double digits. And he did it basically by arresting 40,000 people and throwing them in prison. And the thing is, what he did, and in agreement to what you're saying, what he did is he planned that roadmap from start to end. So, okay, in order to drop this crime, we need to tackle, in their case, the cartels, the gangs. In order to tackle the gangs, the problem is, as you're rightfully to some extent pointing out, it's not just men on the street, it's actually holding these men after we catch them. And in order to hold these men after we catch them, the problem is the court system and the prisons. So what he did was he built a prison and he tackled the courts of the country with an emergency order to ensure that the courts couldn't reverse him arresting and putting these people in prison. So I think for Trinidad and Tobago, that's kind of what we need. If we want to revolutionarily affect the crime situation, Chris, if we want to revolutionarily affect the crime situation in Trinidad and Tobago, what we need is to revolutionarily attack and change the court system so that the people can stay behind bars. I agree with you to some extent. Now, I wouldn't say it wouldn't do anything, because at the end of the day, even if just men on the street, the presence they are there decreases the violent crime in the moment, that's still a positive for the moment. If in a year we get the regiment out on the street and for a year the murder rate drops to 100, that's fine. 500 people, 500 lives saved for that year. I consider that still a beneficial thing. Now, I agree that in the long run, that isn't really solving the issue, because if you have 1,000 of them on the street and they hold someone and the someone goes into jail and is released on bail where their case has to take 15 years to be heard, it's back to the same square one problem.
Nathan, while I hear you and I agree with you to some extent, we live in a society where criminals have more protection and they are law-abiding citizens. We live in a society where criminals have no immediate or no consequences to their action. They go in jail, and as a citizen, we spend $22,000 a month to maintain a criminal. They get police transport up and down the bush road, escorted in air condition, while me and you, as the average man, suffer building small businesses and trying to make a living for our family. But this is the great society of the Great P&M, the longest serving government in the Queen's history. Right? That creates and builds slums throughout Trinidad and Tobago. And they have, and I'm a person that is very optimistic about Trinidad and Tobago most times. But you see, this level of crime, this level of black boys dying by the falls and the trees, and we must be real, because this is all other races is living in a more productive manner. It's only my coffee children is the apparently related to Escobar in the blood. and that is this is somewhat of what happened in Palestine. This is black genocide.
Because Rome, you have to understand something, right? The systematic destruction of our nation has been perpetuated a lot, and certain things have been set in place by this present administration to cause it to happen. Just tonight, I was walking the streets of Port of Spain, and it is alarming to me to see how much youths.
You walk the streets of Port of Spain in the night, bro?
Right? No. I was coming from work. I don't hang out in town. I was just passing through. Right? And the amount of youths are sleeping on the pavement due to this decriminalization of marijuana, which they so seem to want to be eating, drinking, and they're losing their mind, and the government just clapping and saying, get them more, right? They get them 4 trees and they can't consume the 4 trees. They will smoke what they can't smoke, they will eat. And the government watching them go to the institutions, lose their mind, and when they can't control the thinking, they pick up a gun.
I'm not even going as far as the trees. I'm talking about the dignity and the sanctity of human life. Right? Whatever vice you choose to live by, we live in a free society. My thing, at some point, the sanctity and the dignity of all human life must be respected. And somebody about who giving them the guns. That's the level of desensitization that is required. The fact of the matter is that people are dying.
You know what I really do like to hear by Rome? And I don't like to hear this in nearly any instance. The excusing of adult human behavior by, somebody facilitate the behavior for them. So, who give them the guns? Like, these men don't have a human mind that they could choose to do what they want to do. And even still, as I regularly see, bro, Mr. Political Leader, I think you might be out of the game for too long if what you're suggesting is that the 1% giving the black boys the gun to kill out each other. That's not the truth. Those black boys bringing their guns all on their own. The stash in Santa Cruz wasn't a stash in Glencoe. It didn't come out of a house in West Moorings. These black boys have ability all on their own, and no one needs to facilitate them. They can hold blame for their own actions all on their own. No one needs to share the blame. Who facilitate them doing this? Like, when I read about, again, to bring in the current event issue with Palestine, Israel, and people say, well, the Israel Defense Force, they stood down so Hamas could go in and do that massacre on October 7th, and they planned that. And I'm like, even if that was true, standing down isn't an excuse for you to do what you did, you doing the act. So as you're saying, Rome, the problem is the sanctity of life. They are doing that act. These triple, quadruple, triple murders we're seeing regularly. Many of the times, some of the people killed, some of the people murdered, aren't even part of the intended targets. They're just, by the way, and I don't care. You just stood in the way of the one I wanted, and I don't care, you could pass out too. That's a loss of the sanctity of life. Now, I just to touch back on the marijuana issue that you were talking about, the decriminalization. I agree with the decriminalization of marijuana. However, I think, as with many things, there's more to look at when you're doing things like that. If we had this as a criminalized drug, it doesn't make sense to just release the criminality and see what happens in society. I don't think that necessarily makes sense. And I do agree that it seems with the younger generation, and in the US they have been complaining about this, they started the decriminalization before us. And people are complaining that in many cities, every street corner smells of marijuana. That's not a positive thing. Recreation, I don't agree on that. And I don't think it might be the ideal thing to use marijuana for recreational purposes, but I don't think that a government should send men with guns to put you behind bars and take away your freedom for you burning a plant and inhaling the smoke and then feeling lazy after. I think that doesn't make sense. That's not how you solve those issues. I think how you solve that issue is it's a cultural issue. Culturally, you need to figure out ways to deal with that. And maybe before you decriminalize it, or while you were decriminalizing it, you should have put some consideration to that. Maybe. Yeah, Room.
Well, and just to follow up on what you say when you're speaking about guns don't kill people. It's people kill people because the guns are not going to go off on itself. So I hate when people make excuses, just as you rightfully said, that who is bringing in the gun. I find as a society and as a black society, we blame everybody for everything. It's the 1%. It's the Syrian. It's this. It's that. So you telling me that our black and young black community have no self-agency to determine our own future and our own free will? What level of foolishness? What level of surrender? Martin Luther King really had a dream and die in his dream, boy.
Black Alpha have been smelling cigarettes from birth, but it's accepted. Yeah. That's what I said. I don't agree criminalizing it. The guns could stop. Political leader, name a country that has stopped guns. Where's a country that has stopped guns in the world? Let me answer that, because you aren't speaking, you're typing there. There isn't one. Even in some of those most safe countries, they haven't, because like theoretically anything is possible. Yes, theoretically you could stop all the guns from coming in. Theoretically. But that's if you could get every 1.4 million humans in Trinidad and Tobago to theoretically do what you theoretically think they should. But life doesn't work like that. You can't make grand plans and expect everyone to just follow it like that. It doesn't work. And you know, the idea of just saying things and them happening, that's not how reality functions. You could get a court to say something, but if the court cannot enforce what they say, then how is it going to stop? Like somebody was talking about this, the anti-gang law. There's an anti-gang law that was passed on our books. I believe some part of it lapsed. But either way, there are people all around Instagram with some number between 6 to 9 on their name, proudly putting themselves as being part of an organized criminal enterprise, a gang. And they do it because what is the court going to do? The court could say what they want. If they can't enforce it, what's going to happen? You all don't have a clue. Okay, political leader. You all don't have those clues, bro. Blues clues. Yeah, Rome.
Yeah, well, if let me tell you something. I see even that guy who called himself a political leader, and these are the kind of outrageous and low vibration statements when we trying to have even a conversation and trying to understand what the facts are and speak from a point of having information. And this is the same level of nonsense that we are getting at the higher level with Dr. Key Crystal Rowley, Fitzgerald Hines, where we are getting people who are vacuous, who lack ideas, who lack strategy, who lack any form of sense that sits.
Thank you. You know, you said that there, and let me jump in on that right there, because that is the problem that I see with the police service. And I am not, some people might not believe it, but I'm not particularly a fan of Double G, you know. But to me, that was at least the difference that Double G appeared to give. At least in appearance, he gave that impression. And I find the new commissioner, Stephen Williams, Philbert, all those guys are cut out of the same cloth. Like, okay, we understand this status quo PNM run of the mill, same way it's been done since 1960, is not working. Can we please have another idea? And it feels like, you're right on that sense. It feels like sometimes this PNM government, the Dr. Keith Rowley-led government, like they're out of ideas. So what next? Well, we're just going to keep plugging away at what we're doing, but what we're doing isn't working. How do we change it? Well, we're going to plug away at what we're doing, and you go to Canada, and then you tell the Canadian Prime Minister that, well, we need to try and find a way because the constitution of our country isn't suited for the people of our country. You go complain to Canada about that. You are the leader of the legislative branch of this country. If the constitution, if the words in the law books aren't lining up with the culture of the people, you are responsible for fixing that. You go to Canada to complain about that.
And then not only go to Canada to complain. This is the fatuousness that I cannot believe. You extend a woman named Erla, who cannot lead at that level in that organization. She cannot lead men. That's the best way to put it. You extend her commissionership because she was supposed to retire by an additional year. Someone who have not given us a single KPI to be proud of. Someone who cannot even speak in public. Someone who sounds like the fail altar. Because it's heartfelt to realize the level of.
But Rome, you in my life long enough to know I've been complaining, and I try to complain about this with a kind of leveled thing because I don't want to insult anybody personally, especially when it comes to education and things. But real senior police officers have the altar talk.
You know me, I'm a very level-headed person, right? I've come here and I speak on the. You know, see, when you are starting to this person starts speaking out of emotion, that's not emotion, that's concern. That's concern for when people think that you are foolish and they're giving you everything but what you need. Because these police officers are paid to make us feel safe. I do not feel safe in my own country. So that is not an emotion, that's a fact. All I'm doing is emoting a fact that I feel. And I am quite sure that there are many other citizens who are feeling quite the same way that I am feeling. So it's not emotions. It's not emotion, it's a fact. And when you have people there, I'm telling you, well, months, when you're gonna see things reverting to some level of normalcy.
Mr. You see that comment, and I really dislike that comment. The police cannot prevent crime, be realistic. And regularly the police use a kind of excuse like that. And then, I don't understand if they don't get this. If you say something like that, the next rejoinder to that is, what's the point of police then? If you can't prevent crime, why are you here? But then you'd say, well, actually they do, and they do it well, then do it better. That's all. Do what you're supposed to do better, and you aren't doing it as good, obviously, as you can. Like, when you say you're doing your best, then you're telling me your best isn't good enough. When you say that it's not the police's fault for the crime situation, they can't do anything about it, then my question is, what's the point of it? If you're saying, well, Erla is trying her best, she can't affect anything there, then you're telling me she's not the person for the job. You're telling me you could have replaced her with any random police officer and it would have been the same job. Well, then why should we place you there? Best we get a 20-year-old, at least they'll bring youth and a pretty face to the job. If there's no difference between what you could do or what someone else could do, that's not a good excuse. That excuse does not work.
And even Nathan, just to follow up on what you said, police cannot prevent crime. Agreed. But what they can do, they can deter crime by having convictions and convicting people who have committed crime. But if you live in a society where a conviction rate can't even go into double figures, you cannot deter crime. The police main responsibility is to deter crime by having a high level of conviction, so that as a potential criminal, I could see there are consequences to my actions. At this point in my beloved country, all criminals saying, if I beat a old woman, I'll get put up on social media and I'll get bail tomorrow and I will still have the $70,000. And then a police officer will come and come and say, well, I can get back the money for you, but you need to give me $10,000. And because
Mr. Right, finish.
The salary is not enough after getting $12,000, $10,000 as a police officer.
Mr. Police job isn't to prevent crime. Their job is is enforcement of laws. And you're right, but properly enforcing laws in a speedy, timely manner deters and prevents crime. That's how they prevent crime. Listen, in Trinidad and Tobago, if you were sure every crime you committed, the police are going to find you, arrest you. You're echoing a little bit there, boy. See if you could. I'd have to mute that. Alright. Turn off that mic a little bit there for your buddy. Yeah. If every crime you commit, you're found and arrested, there will be much less people committing crimes. That is the deterrent. And as I heard you say there, Room, about the commissioner and she can't lead men and that kind of talk, I've been hearing talk about that, and I don't know how much of it is totally accurate. I hear talk about promotions that are now looking to equalize gender promotions are along the ranks. I've heard talk about that, and then after I heard that talk, I'm talking about from inside, about gendered promotions, I saw a picture of the promotions and it really started to look like, there were 50-50 females to males being promoted. And if there's any kind of equity aim inside of the police service now,
Trinidad going to hell in a whole handbasket, because if all you have no intentions about because I believe in equal opportunity but not equality of outcomes.
Of course,
different people are driven by different things. So when people say about equality, equality requires a deep reflection in terms of what is required, and I don't personally think that we should as a police service be setting gender-based goals when 90% of the crimes are committed by males and who think a particular set of way. But then that's a different psychosocial conversation. But the idea that we are sitting on modern gender and what's the word, boy? Political correctness at this point in time, when we are dealing with a bunch of savages, it really shows you how out of touch this leadership is, and they have a very high-minded American approach that does not reflect our reality.
Like, Derek says next problem is she also don't have the respect as a leader. And listen, I think this is just no. I think this is something that you have to take into consideration, and it could seem unfair, but I think if you're choosing the leader of the police service, which is predominantly male, which has a serious aggression and violence factor to it, I think the consideration should be had there whether a woman leader of the police service is even someone who is ideal in a violent country as Trinidad and Tobago. That's a question that should be asked. Like, do you put a man to lead a preschool? Go ahead, Mr.
Good night. The crime, the police have to play, the government have their role to play, the judiciary has their role to play, the population, the society we live in have the biggest role to play. I come out of Gonzales, right? When I was a youth growing up, you would never see primary school level children on the road linemen after 6 in the night. We have a breakdown in society. We have a moral breakdown in society, a discipline breakdown in society. The problem starts at home with the same population complaining about the crime problem.
I agree.
People complain about it. It starts at home in the houses. So the government can revise the entire constitution, all the legislation. The police can put an officer in every corner. Every society find a way to amend itself, rein in your children, the younger generations. The indiscipline is not going to stop. It's not going to stop.
But hear what I'm saying there. I agree with what you're saying. The government, the police cannot change the discipline and behavior of the society. That starts from home, and the homes are dysfunctional, which is causing that. And we are seeing an increase in dysfunctionality from the homes and all that. I agree. But there have been civilizations, there have been societies where a minority of a group of people come in with a majority that hates them and wants to kill them, and the society maintains a peaceful working order for decades. How does that happen? That happens due to the law enforcement they have. And that's what I'm saying in Trinidad and Tobago. I am not saying that it's not something that is starting at the community and family level. That's not what I'm saying. Of course it is. I know, I agree. I am not saying that it's something that isn't multifaceted. I agree. But what I'm saying is, even with the social breakdowns that do exist, there is action, there is policy that can be made to even handle crime fighting in a society that is devolving. It is possible to happen.
And Nathan, even the idea that homes are broken and all that kind of thing. If you look at Trinidad and Tobago, I would assume that majority of Trinidad and Tobago is right-thinking people. The criminal elements, as well as the elements that are populating our society and making law-abiding citizens' life difficult, is less than 10% of the population. And we need to understand that when it comes to parenting and all those kind of things, it's not a new issue. Every generation will face their own challenges when it comes to parenting and in terms of what is expected of that particular generation. But what we cannot understand and what we cannot accept is the blatant disrespect for the dignity of human life. That's not across the board. A lot of people is playing smart with foolishness and talking about parenting. It has nothing to do with that. The dignity of human life is a reflection of the society.
All right. No, I speak from my experience and my observations, right? I'm gonna show you something, and I'm sure needs to know it, and I'm very sure Rome know it too, and plenty other viewers. Average age are the people who killing right now. Who doing shootings and killings. They reach 20 years old yet. The majority of the killings. They reach 25 years old yet. Some of them may reach 20 years old yet. So it's like when you're watching the movies, the vampires don't like to change turn, no? Because a child vampire you can't control. They're going on a rampage. It's the same thing with the youth dealing with now. They have guns. And it's a power play. So they're on a rampage. Shooting a man is nothing. Shoot a man for kids. Shoot a man and go on the block and laugh about it after.
And let me ask a different question. Why is that?
Again, the moral breakdown in the society from home. It's in the schools.
So let me ask you a different question. So
not living in a poverty country. I just go on islands on my job. We're not living in a poverty-stricken country.
No, we're not.
We have a problem in Trinidad. It's a societal problem.
Let me ask you a different question. So would that same child go in Uncle Sam country, shoot somebody, and go on the block and laugh about it?
Yes. So when you think things are happening in Uncle Sam country too, I not living in a bubble because I see it for myself.
What I'm talking about the consequences of their action and the consequences of their action coming home to them. While it may happen in other countries, the consequences do come home.
Yeah,
and that's what I'm talking about. Because look at New York. Since we wanted to talk about the breakdown of society and the breakdown of crime, I remember when New York had a ridiculous crime situation. If you're a child of history, what's the fella name he's now Trump lawyer?
Giuliani.
What's his name?
Giuliani.
When it had serious crime war in New York, where it was more than 6, 7, 8 murders a day. Sometimes a greater force need to arrest.
But are Trinidadians willing to deal with the measures that will have to be taken to combat the crime problem?
That's the question.
I don't think that has nothing to do with Trinidadian. The government had the backbone enough to make the decisions. That at the end of the day, your name is to govern, to rule, to guide, to set. You are elected by a majority.
That is the fallacy about that they have us thinking. Our government main focus is how is this going to affect the polls? Let me be realistic. How is this going to affect the polls down the road?
Well, it's going to affect the polls that they're going to lose election on crime.
They rather win an election.
The thing is, like, what happened in El Salvador? The question eventually comes sometimes when crime continues getting worse and worse and worse. The question eventually comes to the level that, okay, after people started to see the results and extortion of every single business ended and murder rate dropped to single digits, it's only family affairs and somebody kill over land 2-3 times for the year. People are like, okay, I love living in this society, I'm going to take that. So to some extent, it's more than just looking at the polls. It's looking at the future of your country. And if you indeed are somebody with that kind of leadership quality where you're willing to look at the future for the betterment of the entirety of the country, if you have that kind of thing in mind. New York City still has a crime situation, and I think that's a good thing to show about the same problem we're talking about, with whether it's societal breakdown or policies. Because New York City, I would say the societal breakdown may have been continuing on whichever trend it was. Yet the crime situation we saw had the spike in the 80s And then when there was government policy to change how the state and police dealt with crime and criminals, crime dropped. Giuliani came serious on crime, and then they sailed in on that nice low crime happy New York City for a couple decades. They got eventually the easy times that make weak men. These weak men came into positions and they started to do policies like, maybe we should release some of these criminals earlier. Maybe we shouldn't arrest people so quickly for some of these things. We have to be a lot kinder and a lot more soft-hearted. And then what would you know? Shockingly, New York City's crime situation is spiking again. So I think it's much more policy related than just community. The community is real, the community is factual, but I think the policy of crime fighting coming from the judicial level and the law enforcement level, I think that could handle crime even with degrading societies. Anyway, people, we're looking to close. Let me get your closing statements there, Roman.
Well, my closing statement is this. We as a society need to be clear in terms of what we want and where we're going. Because a lot of the business community exists in Trinidad. Because when you and your family feeling unsafe, the level of home invasion, the level of sometimes you could understand crime on the streets, but you see when they coming home to your family, someone tying up your wife, beating your wife, and doing all kind of thing in your house and those kind of things. We need to understand the perception of safety and freedom is very important for any society to continue to grow. We as a society, we are shrinking because there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of uncertainty, and there's a lot of propaganda and a lot of talk and no clear activity and strategy in terms of how we as a society and our government is going to deal with this crime situation moving forward.
But I agree with you, but I would say this, if we ever get a government administration that is willing to make moves like the government in El Salvador, and the population are willing to bear the inconvenience of those type of actions, see the difference. And as for the statement to make about the business community in Trinidad and Tobago is a set of blood-sucking vampires, because all they do is take out of society. They don't contribute back anything. That is my take on it.
All right. I wouldn't say all of the business community is that, but I understand why people think so. I understand the reasoning many people think so. Death penalty, I don't agree with the death penalty. I don't think that we should give a state, a government, the permission to kill people. And I mean, even morally, if someone has already been held and they're no longer a threat, are you saying you're just going to kill them sitting there? I don't think that's actually beneficial to society. To me, here's where I'd put even a step maybe further in some people's opinion. If you're saying that we could kill the person, to me the better thing might be to turn them into a slave. If we were going to kill you anyway, best we enslave you and you'd be a slave to our society till you die, paying back our society for the loss that you have imposed on it. I prefer that. I prefer instead anyone that you think deserves a death penalty, they get permanent enslavement. Till death you are a slave. Nathan, if your loved one is killed, you will say differently. And I mean, vengeance is true. Humans have the feeling for revenge and vengeance. I'm not talking about the personal, emotional feeling for vengeance. I understand that. I feel vengeful too. So I'm not disagreeing that I'll feel different if it directly affects me. But if you're making decisions for a country, for an entire society, you're not making decisions based on your direct effect. You're trying to make decisions based on what would be best for the country. And in terms of what would be best for the country, I don't think the death penalty is such, and I don't think the death penalty works. If you look at statistics, the death penalty is not a deterrent. People who are murderers don't think too much about their life while they're murdering. The death penalty doesn't really work for a deterrent like that. And if someone is, if you, as Black Alpha says, you have to first catch the people, and we don't catch the people anyway in Trinidad and Tobago. But even if we were to catch everyone, I think catching someone and telling them that you're going to be a slave for life is probably scarier than catching them and telling them that we're going to kill you in a month's time. I think enslaving them benefits our society more. It's more of a deterrent. It helps us. It would help the victim. Maybe the next of kin of the murdered person could receive the benefits of this enslaved person's labor for the rest of their life. Who knows? I think something like that is still better than just killing them. And we fed this person. If they murdered somebody at the age of 25, the society would have fed and made this person strong and healthy. Nah, work, give us back our money. Should we bring back the strokes? Yes. Now you're talking things down my lane. Strokes, yes. Like, I wouldn't even mind that some punishments for some crimes, you may not even need to imprison them. Strokes alone. Certain crimes. Like, you're a shoplifter, strokes. Walk for we till you're dead, so to speak. And yes, Trini boy, yes. Work, bring dashing and concrete. That's the kind of work I'm talking about. You're there watering dashing and concrete. You could bring hydroponics dashing from concrete. No, Mr. That's not Sharia. Sharia is a whole package of laws. And trust me, you don't want, and I certainly don't want, the entire package. That's why I said, if we're talking about certain stricter laws, I agree, certain laws should be stricter, but not the whole package. I don't want the full package. No thanks. Anyway, people, it was nice. As usual, be mindful, not mindless, as Trini Hotep says, and I will see you guys for the next Mindful Live, which will where we come and we discuss what is in the live, what people have to say, what the current events might be. That's what we're doing. We're discussing. So if you're interested in that, be sure to tune in tomorrow evening around that 9 p.m. time until Boy, Paul Duncan, you really stumped me there. No, tomorrow is Thursday, bro. You really had me stuttering for a bit there. Tomorrow is Thursday. So I'll see you guys then. I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained. This has been the Mindful Live Show. I am Nathan Springer. See you guys tomorrow. I'm out. Peace. Bye.